I used to be just like you know, unwashed, lost, afraid, craving the touch of a woman and yet despising the hand that reached out, an incel. I remember all too well those days which bled into night, then back into day, spent helplessly crawling through YouTube, Reddit, 4chan, the depths of the internet were cold comfort from the scorn of the outside world. But they were all I had. And then, in my darkest hour, he reached out. He alone offered the words which captured how I felt. He lent me hope. He put me on the right path of a higher purpose. Donald Trump, as if he were a messiah blessed with the vision from high. He always spoke the truth that society was too apathetic, too scared, too weak to accept. The world may not have all been ready to heed his words, but I was ready to stop being an incel, a sheep, a virgin, ready to become a Chad, ready to finally be like Tyler Durden. Tyler Durden is a character from the 1996 book, later turned movie, Fight Club. Fight Club depicts this man, Tyler Durden, shepherding a group of emasculated and disillusioned office workers fed up with the status quo, from underground boxing rings to a terrorist fucking organization. You do not need to have watched Fight Club for this video, as this video will be sort of going over Fight Club's ramifications, how Fight Club can be seen as a lens of analysis, because the campaign of Tyler Durden is eerily similar to that of Donald Trump's alt-right campaign. Specifically, its micro-targeting of incel, pickup artists, men's rights activists, and other so-called Manosphere communities. I hope this dissection of Fight Club and its real-world counterpart, Trump, incels, and the alt-right, serves to demystify talking about the alt-right in an intellectual sense, as a lack of down-to-earth academic looks into these topics is what leads to events like #Gamergate. That's why this is a YouTube video, and because it's a YouTube video, I can say fuck! I have an interest in this topic. The rise of the alt-right, as we will later discuss, is diametrically opposed to a few things like my rights. One of the architects of this insurgency says about his induction into politics that for someone gay and in a wheelchair, my challenges were political. My life was political. My mere existence was political. But more importantly, continues to speak about the hacker community and his relation to it. Hackers couldn't care less what you look like or if you walk funny. I learned that no system is absolute. The hacker philosophy taught me that if you shift your perspective on any system, computer, a network, even society, you may discover flaws and vulnerabilities. As a gay kid in a wheelchair, I came to understand systems of power early on in life. But as a hacker, I learned that every system has a weakness waiting to be exploited. When researching this video, this book hooked me. As a trans person, as a programmer, as a sociologist, as someone with an interest in psychology, something about all of these coming together to destroy American society was fascinating. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I have one thing to say before we get started. Don't talk about Fight Club. Think of this as Think of this as a phrase like "Make America Great Again." Topic and content warnings for racism and white supremacy, toxic masculinity, misogyny, shirtless men, mass shootings, politics, the Trump campaign, psychological warfare, and the alt-right, as well as cults, Jonestown 1984, and finally Incels, the pickup artist community and men's rights activist movements. There's also mentions of suicide, cancer, and mental health. Chuck Palahniuk, author of Fight Club, asks readers on the first page of his book, Choke, back here, that I was gifted to not read Choke in order to save themselves while they're still in one piece. Palahniuk is a masterclass troll that deserves a feature-length video for himself, but this complexity has led him to create the rabbit hole that is Fight Club. Fight Club leads people down very, very weird places and hundreds of pages of reading, and this deep in the rabbit hole, it's time to start getting into the nitty-gritty and start rolling around in some dark basements. Ew. November 18, 1978 saw the deaths of 912 lives from cyanide poisoning or gunfire in the country of Guyana. The Guyana settlement served as an escape from the racism and persecution of the United States, but in reality acted as a voluntary concentration camp. The settlement, run by Jim Jones, would later be known as Jonestown. Jones had a fascination with power and the real-world leaders ranging from Stalin to Marx to Mao Zedong, Gandhi to primarily Hitler. But these were all figures able to capitalize off populist ideology regardless of their goals and actions. Gandhi and Marx were populist leaders. They wanted to upend the status quo. Marx through economic reform and Gandhi through political and peaceful resistance. Philip Zimbardo, infamous for the cruel and unusual Stanford prison experiment, saw Jones's techniques similar to that of George Orwell's literal 1984. Cruelty knows cruelty best, it seems. The four tenets Jones borrowed from 1984 to build Jonestowns were the panopticon of Big Brother. Big Brother is watching you, but of course, there was no way of knowing at any given moment. The use of self-incrimination and public humiliation. Suicide drills. The proper thing to do was kill yourself before they get to you. The blurring of words and reality. The fourth point refers to a concept in 1984 known as newspeak. The high concept of 1984 is, what if a dystopian government, in SOC or English socialism, existed and controlled the population? 1984 has become synonymous with authoritarianism or anything vaguely related to it, but one of its most important ideas is this idea of newspeak. Newspeak, created by 1984's INCSOC government, is a language created to control a population by removing, truncating, and adding words to prevent rebellious thoughts. It's mind control. INCSOC itself serves as an example. Newspeak takes a complicated idea, English socialism, and simplifies it in a way discarding unnecessary meaning. While most equate 1984 to any form of authoritarianism, it is this specific kind of a manipulation of the language and the mind that truly classifies 1984. It's a real-world phenomenon. The Nazi Party is short for the National Socialist Party or the National Socialist Party. Politburo is short for the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. But because of the truncation of unnecessary words, you don't think of a Nazi as a National Socialist. You just think of them as a Nazi, which has a different meaning. When you think of the Politburo, you don't think of revolutionary communism, you think of Stalin. The combination of words creates a sort of new word that can be appropriated to any meaning. Another example we will cover later is incel. An incel is short for involuntary celibate, or in layman's terms, someone who can't get laid by forces outside their control. Yeah, but we sure don't think of incels as people who just can't get laid. The word has developed its own new meaning. George Orwell poses the idea that in a sufficiently authoritarian regime, newspeak can control a population. A great counterexample of this is pronouns. Checkmate, liberals. The idea is, if you remove pronouns from a language, there's little way to express gender identity, essentially erasing gender as a concept in the mind. If you remove the word power from language, then how do you talk about power dynamics? You could talk about control or injustice, but what if you remove those from the language? The thought police implies these ideas of power, control, and injustice, but if you remove the words thought and police by combining them into, say, a simplified concept of think poll, Ingsoc creates a secret police that cannot mentally be perceived by the populace as bad. Sorry, not bad, but ungood. Control is key. Jim Jones indoctrinated through an us versus them mentality and preying on irrational fears. If you can prey on an individual's weakest points, their hatred, their fears, insecurities, you convince them to follow you. You can then capitalize off their insecurities, limit their speech, instill in them a fear of rebellion, train them to commit suicide, and commit extremist acts. You can create a fucking army. Tyler Durden is a populist leader who capitalizes off a disillusioned and emasculated populace in order to build an insurgent army. Analysis. Fight Club can be split into two stories. Fight Club is the story of an emasculated and disillusioned office worker, Jack, finding his identity through underground boxing rings and his relationship with the characters of Tyler Durden and Marla Singer, as well as his relationship to his own masculinity. Fight Club is also the story of Jack following the lead of Tyler Durden to create first underground boxing rings, then terrorist organization, inevitably becoming Tyler Durden. The first is an interpersonal view on toxic masculinity, emasculation, disillusionment with the status quo, while the second is a story focused on how that is leveraged for the sake of Tyler Durden's populist campaign. Fight Club is best known for Fight Club. However, Fight Club is a underground boxing club only takes up about a third of the story. Fight Club is a story with 3 arcs: the birth of Tyler Durden, the first recruit, and Tyler Durden's army. The birth of Tyler Durden is the story of Jack's struggles in working class America and the subsequent emasculation and disillusionment. Tyler Durden is an alter ego of Jack, occupying a role somewhere in between psychosis, hallucination, and dissociative personality. The first recruit is the story of Jack's indoctrination into Fight Club by Tyler Durden through populist ideals, and finally, Tyler Durden's army is the story of Tyler. Tyler, through the use of techniques of indoctrination used on Jack and other characters such as Bob, is able to amass a terrorist organization named Project Mayhem, capable of, blowing up buildings. Each of these sections involves moving elements and characters, but it's ultimately 2 stories: the micro interpersonal story of Jack in corporate America and the macro story of Tyler Durden's populist campaign. This story eerily echoes aspects of Trump's campaign, something we will discuss afterwards. We can use the lens of Fight Club to analyze modern movements. Fight Club and the Trump campaign are both stories of an exploitation of the same emasculated and disillusioned communities. So an understanding of Fight Club helps us dissect the Trump campaign. Meanwhile, an understanding of the Trump campaign can also help us dissect Fight Club. At the end of Fight Club, Marla Singer, the main female romantic interest of Fight Club, describes Jack and Tyler as an insane person, intolerable, with serious emotional problems, deep-seated problems for which he should seek professional help. Marla is a suicidal Xanax addict who, for fun, goes to support groups for cancer patients. For her to say Jack needs help, well, there's definitely some weight behind that. However, Jack did not start off as this person, as Tyler. Jack starts off as a disillusioned and emasculated office worker in corporate America who sees something wrong, but he just can't put his finger on it. A lot happens between being a disillusioned office worker and becoming a terrorist organization leader. And the first step is insomnia. Jack does not sleep. The first conflict of Fight Club portrays Jack desperately trying to cure his insomnia by any means necessary. His insomnia is driving him insane because with insomnia, nothing is real. Everything is far away. Everything is a copy of a copy of a copy. And even as someone without insomnia, I can sympathize with the stress that must put Jack under. 3 weeks into Jack's insomnia, Jack revisits the doctor. The explanation? Insomnia is just the symptom of something larger. Find out what's actually wrong. Listen to your body. Jack's insomnia stems from a metaphorical something larger. There's an underlying cause. This, combined with a feeling of insanity, creates a setup in which Jack needs to find the underlying cause. Jack's underlying cause is routine. Jack lives a simple life. Simple office job in a simple world. A world where nothing goes wrong. A very corporate world. A very perfect world. Jack thinks he's at the height, able to see through everyone. A literal bird's eye view. The movie portrays Jack's beginnings from the perspective of an outside observer. Jack is never explicitly named. Jack is simply the narrator. With Jack only being the name the Fight Club community gave him, or I gave him, I don't know if I'm just going insane. Jack does not live his life. He just simply looks on as his life continues. And this is mostly achieved through Edward Norton's near monotone narration, creating the sense of monotonous routine. It's impressive. And Jack is a hypocrite. As Jack's very, very perfect life goes on, he quips to his boss that, he was full of pep, must have had his grande latte enema. This is immediately followed by a shot of Jack taking a shit, reading the newspaper in a disinterested manner, only lasting a few seconds. Grande latte is obviously a Starbucks drink. An enema is a liquid preparation inserted into the rectum, which is commonly used to aid bowel evacuation. A grande latte enema is quite literally sodomization by corporate America, or in less sophisticated terms, Jack is being fucked in the ass by Starbucks. Jack's boss suffers from this form of emasculation through routine, but so does Jack as he reads the newspaper on a toilet. The routine of mindlessly flipping through newspapers, living life as a space monkey, doing the little job he's trained to do. Pull a lever, push a button. Jack is nothing more than a slave to the IKEA nesting instinct. Jack is suffering. How can he feel alive in this monotonous routine? He finds the answer, though, by tasting another person's death. He does this in St. Christopher's Episcopal Church by visiting cancer support groups, pretending he is dying of testicular cancer. Not only is Jack bored and a hypocrite, but also kind of a narcissist. Almost grandiose. St. Christopher is widely regarded as a martyr in Christian religion, and although exclusive to the movie, it's not much of a stretch to say Jack internally views himself or the dead people in support groups as martyrs. They die so Jack may live. It's really narcissistic, and the idea of narcissism will play a role later on in Trump's campaign, not for the reasons you might think initially. And among the men slowly dying of testicular cancer, Jack never felt more alive. Jack feels bliss because not even babies sleep this well. It becomes his new routine. Jack's bliss is shattered by Marla Singer. Marla Singer, as I stated earlier, is the main female romantic interest in Fight Club. Marla is a liar and a fake and a tourist. And Jack needs this. He needs this group. He can't sleep with Marla here. Marla's a tourist, a fake, a liar. Get out. With Marla's intrusion into his sanctuary, Jack is no longer able to sleep. 2 nights into sleeplessness, Jack begins questioning reality. Marla is a fake to Jack, Jack is a fake to Marla, but is every last individual in these support groups faking with their lesions and their coughs and tumors? Marla's lie reflects Jack's lie, but all he can see is lies. This is the only thing real in Jack's life. Jack is driven insane and his world is muddled. The world cannot revolve around Marla and Jack simultaneously. Jack and Marla cannot both be the center of the world. Marla may be a liar, a fake, a tourist, but so is Jack. Too weak to admit he is himself a liar, a fake, and a tourist. Everything to Jack once again becomes far away, a copy of a copy of a copy. However, now Jack knows the cause. The cause is he needs excitement, fueled by this routine of others' suffering, the taste of death that keeps Jack alive, the amazing miracle of death, so sweet. If it weren't for Marla. Marla doesn't die though, and Jack still cannot sleep. The only refuge of sleep is from the brief moment where the plane banks too much to one side, where Jack hopes for death. Narratively, Jack is plagued by insomnia and stress. Metaphorically, Jack is being fucked in the ass by America and is narcissistic. He is weak, and at his darkest moment, ripe for exploitation. This is how he meets Tyler Durden. Tyler's birth is illogical. Tyler, you are by far the most interesting single-serving friend I've ever met, Jack says as a soap salesman explains how to create napalm. Was it a nude beach? Naked and sweating, gritty with sand, his hair wet. Tyler had been around for a long time before we met, pulling driftwood logs out of the surf. It's actually kind of important for me to mention that probably this is some of the absolute gayest the book gets. Jack is quite literally simping for Tyler Durden as he's naked, just glistening with sweat on a beach, pulling driftwood. It's really gay. But in this story, Jack simps for Durden. He simps for the version of himself he wants to be. But wasn't Tyler also a movie projectionist with The Union, a banquet waiter at the hotel downtown? He gave me his phone number? Or was it simply just a card labeled The Paper Street Soap Company? Was the birth of Tyler an instant? Was the birth of Tyler a gradual coming into existence as Jack continuously devolves into madness? Doesn't matter. On page 30, or at 28:35 of the movie, Jack calls Tyler begging to deliver Jack, to rescue Jack, to deliver Jack from Swedish furniture, from clever art. Jack begs, may I never be complete, may I never be content, may I never be perfect. Deliver me, Tyler, from being perfect and complete. It's a desperate plea, a desperate attempt, a desperate grab at the only straw left in Jack's life. Jack is disillusioned, doesn't know what else to do. But if you ask Jack now, he couldn't tell you why he called Tyler. He really doesn't know. He's just desperate. He can't sleep. He can't cope. In his own psychosis, he burns his house down. He ruins his life, all in a desperate grapple to make life worth living. No matter the narrative, as the darkest hour reigns in, Tyler picks up the phone. Tyler Durden is born. Tyler Durden's birth actually says a lot about race. Fight Club says a lot about race. It's precisely by the exclusion of race that Fight Club says a lot about race. Everybody in it is white, and why wouldn't they be? It's a white man's story. It's a story of those at society's top not feeling like they're on top anymore. The seemingly perpetual warfare of the American experience was brought to a screeching halt as the last great enemy of American hegemony was defeated. White middle-class Americans no longer have an enemy to fight against. They are left drifting through monotony and white-collar jobs. As Tyler says, they are the middle children of history, and they're very, very pissed off. People of color don't have this problem. They have many other problems. They are them, others, not part of the in-group, while we have to deal with this monotony, this routine, the sense of being closeted to who we truly are. Those who aren't these white men are crushed by the boot of American society in very obvious ways and have been fighting against said boot for hundreds of years. Their perpetual warfare is wholly different from that of white America, and as such, didn't end with the fall of the Soviet Union. It's the warfare against the systems that Fight Club's protagonists have benefited from for so long. Fight Club shows the white America turning its anger inward. Tyler tells the members of Fight Club they are slaves with white collars. Slavery in America obviously has racial connotations. This line then has two meanings. The first is what I think the intended message of the work was, which is that American neoliberal capitalism is the enemy of even the group that it purports to help. White men have just as much to gain by destroying the systems that bind them as any minority. Of course, this is still problematic. Fight Club glosses over the struggles of marginalized people to bend over backwards to accommodate its intended audience by co-opting imagery of the horrors that white people perpetuated against the people of color in America. It's clearly not great. Second, however, is far more dangerous. This is the message that the right, the incels, the reactionaries get out of it. White men are now the oppressed ones. White men don't see themselves as slaves to corporations, but to the woke mob. Their existential threat isn't capitalism, but the great replacement. The banks don't need to be destroyed, the cultural Bolsheviks do, and we'll talk about this more later. The racial message of Fight Club has changed in the decades since the book and the movie came out. It's no longer about disaffected workers finding a way out of our capitalist hellscape, but about a cool guy saying that women and people of color are enslaving and destroying white people for some reason he's actually fake, and for some reason that now only serves as a weird plot twist. Jack is first disillusioned. Jack and Tyler Durden have their first conversation and first Fight Club meeting in a bar. Jack has a complete look of death on his face, look of someone who hasn't slept and had all their possessions burned down. Tyler, at this moment, is a salesperson, and his first step is having Jack realize his disillusionment. Jack is still convincing himself that insurance will cover the burned down condo and therefore return to his previous life, but Tyler has a product to sell, his movement. He asks a leading question: what is a duvet? Why do humans know what a duvet is? Is it really necessary to know what a duvet is? Jack is lost, but listening, responding that our society is just consumers. Tyler immediately goes on to espouse, right, we are consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession. Murder, crime, poverty, these things don't concern me. Tyler pinpoints Jack's issue. He is sick of routine. He is sick of being emasculated by the consumer lifestyle in corporate America. He is desensitized to crime and poverty. He is disillusioned with the status quo. Jack is indoctrinated. Once the realization that he is desensitized settles in, he becomes disillusioned. That's where Tyler offers his solution. Never be complete. Stop being perfect. Let's evolve. Let the chips fall where they may. If Jack is able to discard everything he knows and to stop being perfect, he will evolve. However, Jack doesn't know how to do this. He just knows he has to. And that's why, after offering Jack a place to stay, Tyler asks Jack to hit him as hard as he can. Tyler just asks Jack to do him with this one favor, because he's never been in a fight. This is about a bold-faced lie as one can possibly imagine. Tyler is established through his career as a projectionist, flashing on children's films or restaurant food to have confidence and gusto. Even if Tyler has truly never been in a fight, there's no other reason he'd enter a fight with a Jack just to prove himself something. Tyler is doing this entirely for Jack, just framing it as a simple favor. Combined with a sense of disillusionment, Jack goes from the idea being so fucking stupid to, we should do this again sometime in the span of a 1-minute runtime. While Jack was once a slave to the IKEA nesting instinct, simply collecting furniture for the sake of being perfect and whole, Jack is now completely willing to live in a house which looks like it's waiting to be torn down. It's quite the unpleasant place to live. When Jack turns on the tap water, comes out brown, but Jack doesn't seem to mind. By the end of the first month, he doesn't miss TV. TVs are the symbol of corporate America, where even the shows themselves began blurring the line between advertising and entertainment in the 60s. Jack no longer needs to reference Starbucks in his insults. There isn't even a sign of civilization for miles around. Jack and Tyler then go on to indoctrinate others. Jack and Tyler's fights draw spectators. The first spectator to step up and ask sheepishly, "Can I be next?" is a man who clearly hit the bar right after work, still in suit and tie with kempt hair, although his white shirt is a little ruffled. Tyler's only requirement for this man to have a round is to lose the tie. Ties are yet another symbol of the status quo of corporate America. Beyond that, a tie is not cut out for fighting. It dangles from your neck, easily grabbed, and it can be used to choke you. Tyler is giving the man an ultimatum. Choose your boring-ass life, or choose me. Fight Club begins. Every day, Jack and Tyler pretend to be Ozzie and Harry in a reference to the longest-running live-action sitcom of all time. But every Saturday night, they were finding out that they were not alone. Tyler found a base that he could indoctrinate into his state of mind. They are disillusioned with the status quo of corporate America. In a way, they are all emasculated by society like Jack is by a grande latte enema. They are men who can only cope with their lives through a night at the bar, and when Tyler asks them to metaphorically lose the tie, they willingly become a part of Fight Club. To Jack, this is just finding out that he's not alone, but to Tyler, this is the beginning of his future insurgency. Don't talk about Fight Club is an in-group signal for an us versus them mentality. Fight Club's most famous scene occurs after an undetermined time skip between fighting in a parking lot of a bar and to its dimly lit basement. A crowd gathers around Tyler as he stands, crossed-armed with a triumphant look on his face. Everything exists in silhouette as the light's only bright enough to show Tyler's face. He is the only man in the world. In these conditions, Tyler states, the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. Tyler establishes 3 safety and honor rules. If someone needs to stop, you stop. Only 2 guys to a fight, only 1 fight at a time. Fights go on as long as they have to. Finally, 2 indoctrination rules are established. No shirt, no shoes, and if this is your first night at Fight Club, you have to fight. These rules are at the core of Tyler's goals. No shirt, no shoes signifies allegiance to Tyler. And first night at Fight Club, you have to fight forces indoctrination to those who have just a curiosity and are present. The safety and honor rules enforce masculine ideas of honor and pride. And most importantly, don't talk about Fight Club is stressed in the first 2 rules, making the quote quite famous. But throughout the movie, people do talk about Fight Club. Not talking about Fight Club, but simply alluding to it. Creates an aura of mystery, leading to a it's us versus them mentality. You don't talk about Fight Club to keep a secret. You don't talk about Fight Club because they won't understand. Fight Club's members are polarized. They are separated from the rest of the world. Jack gets right in everyone's hostile little face, acknowledging, yeah, these are bruises from fighting. I am enlightened. Jack is no longer a part of corporate America. Jack starts smoking in the office, showing up with blood-stained shirts. He's sent home. Jack is given an ultimatum. Clean it up and work for the man or go back to the in-group. But Jack, he's given up on the condo life, given up on worldly possessions, and by throwing away the life he's built up by the status quo, Jack is unable to relate to anyone outside of Fight Club. Fight Club is his in-group, and everyone else is them. Women are them. There's no rule against women showing up at Fight Club, but no women do. Fight Club is a narrative for men. A guy came into Fight Club for the first time, his ass was a wad of cookie dough. After a few weeks, he was carved out of wood. Fight Club is seen as a masculine film, ultra-masculine film, serving as a basis for those who feel emasculated and disillusioned to regain their masculinity. And this kind of feels weird to say out loud, but from the movie's perspective, masculinity's only for men. Fight Club is a support group for men only. Women like Marla are just a sport fuck. The othering of women and inherent misogyny of Fight Club serves as a tool for polarization. Fight Club is not only a masculine film, but a toxically masculine film, to the point where Fight Club has become one of those like red flag films that if a date tells you it's their favorite, you run. Unless it's me, obviously. If you're going on a date with me, like, Fight Club is my favorite film, if you couldn't tell. But anyways, toxic masculinity and corporate disillusionment, they go hand in hand. Fight Club changes its participants' worldview. Jack and Tyler feel sorry for the guys packed into gyms trying to look like, how Calvin and Klein and Tommy Hilfiger said they should. To Tyler and Jack, that is not a man. That is just someone absorbed in a self-serving fantasy involving submission to the state. I mean, submission to the status quo. They quite literally equate the self-help and self-improvement junkies to people baiting, as these men do not define their own masculinity through grit, but instead are told by corporate America how to be. Instead of this form of self-improvement, Tyler instead offers self-destruction. Logically, it makes no sense, because self-destruction is self-improvement to these men. That's not how society views it. After Fight Club, everyone felt saved. But in reality, they are members of a society so polarized they can no longer function with the other. It's a self-cycle, where the men in Fight Club are disillusioned and emasculated by corporate America. And these feelings then perpetuate a further feeling of disillusionment and emasculation. They have a sort of hindsight bias where they can never think of being who they once were. This leads these men to be incredibly dangerous. This leads them to be perfect recruits for an army. Why do we believe the stories our leaders tell us? If you want to get thousands of strangers to work as a team, you need someone to hold things together. The human brain, it's not equipped to juggle more than 150 meaningful relationships. Projects such as pyramids or sending rockets to the moon, on that scale, call for cooperation in much larger groups. So leaders need to incentivize us. How? With myths. We learned to imagine kinship with people we've never met. Religions, states, companies, nations, all of these only really exist in our minds, in the narratives our leaders tell. The most obvious example of such a myth is, of course, God, or call it the original Big Brother. Project Mayhem is born. Project Mayhem is a project on the scale of a religion with the capacity to blow up buildings for the sake of wiping all credit. And as the scale of Fight Club exceeds the dozens, then hundreds, it needs a myth on the scale of God. And that God is Tyler Durden. Durden becomes Big Brother, not by physically being everywhere, but because he could be anywhere. Project Mayhem automatizes and disindividualizes Tyler Durden's power. Jack is an inmate in the panopticon. There is no way of knowing whether he is being watched at any given moment. Tyler Durden is internalized in Jack because Jack and Tyler Durden are the same person. And like Jack, Project Mayhem members never know if Durden is around any corner as they ask, is Durden building an army? To Tyler Durden's face. Tyler, throughout the first half of Fight Club, is able to build an army capable of going to any extreme. Throughout the second half, he acts as God, pushing his members to terroristic extremes for the sake of his hypocritical ideals. Project Mayhem is an idea which begins differently between the book and movie. The movie's Project Mayhem originates in Tyler pouring lye powder on Jack's hand because without pain, without sacrifice, we would have nothing. We is Tyler's self-realizations and then Jack's indoctrination. This pain elevates a man like Tyler from leader to God. Tyler views it as the greatest moment of his life, and while Jack is screaming and begging for relief, Tyler drills his philosophy into Jack before ending the pain. First, you have to give up. First, you know no fear. That someday you are going to die. It's coercive. Jack is experiencing more pain than he will ever experience, and the only salvation is submission to the state, submission to Tyler, by vowing the knowledge he will someday die. And in vowing this knowledge, he is more willing to follow Tyler. Jack's vow ends the pain and earns him congratulations. The first mentions of Project Mayhem in the book have no explanation, and this interpretation also makes sense, as you can never know about Project Mayhem. The first rule of Project Mayhem is you do not ask questions about Project Mayhem. Tyler Durden is the only soul knowing all the details. All the tea, dare I say. Tyler creates Fight Club, then Project Mayhem, for it is a fight club that Tyler invents Project Mayhem. Fight Club is a pipeline into Project Mayhem. Bob is the perfect Project Mayhem recruit. At the start of the movie, Bob is that character that Jack is crying into. Bob's origin story is as the originator of chest expansion programs on TV. He is peak corporate masculinity, although never shown to be as such in the movie. To do this, Meatloaf takes brand name steroids, Wisterol and Diagonal, and now, while once at the height of manliness, he is now left bankrupt, divorced, with 2 grown kids who won't even return his phone calls. Corporate America juices Bob for all he's worth, then tosses him aside. They emasculate him, giving him bitch tits as a symbol of his emasculation. Bob cries, "We're still men!" He isn't happy. How can he be? In this state of despair, he finds Fight Club, regaining his masculinity and able to feel better than he's ever been in his whole life. Tyler spreads Project Mayhem. Without Jack's knowledge, Tyler spreads Fight Club to 2 other weeknights. Without Jack's influence, he is able to recruit new members to the cause. His indoctrination begins by stating the influx of new members means a lot of people have been breaking the first 2 rules of Fight Club. Yet, he then immediately veers into a speech. Mention of the first 2 rules isn't necessarily a chastisement, but a reminder of members' allegiance to Tyler before beginning the new members' indoctrinations. He names those gathered in the dimly lit basement as slaves with white collars. Fight Club is inherently for the white-collar corporate worker, as they are the ones emasculated most by society, the most susceptible to Tyler's ideals. The men gathered in Fight Club are the middle children of history with no purpose or place. They are the middle children because they are lost without a purpose of an older brother, the love of a younger brother, without a war to fight or an economic depression to conquer. There is nothing for them to dominate. The great war these men need to fight is a spiritual war, and the depression they need to conquer is their lives. Tyler's final 2 notes before the cutoff are, "We're very, very pissed off," and the first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about. Tyler acknowledges the anger and resentment built up among white-collar slaves, giving them words to describe their anguish, and then restating the first rule of Fight Club gives them a leader to follow. Tyler's insanity escalates and mayhem follows. Tyler begins handing out homework assignments ranging from causing power outages to befouling fountains to performance artists. News clippings for the performance artist only talks about politics in the new court's opening. If the articles say anymore, these words are covered by Tyler's hand. After all, this is Tyler's narrative. Homework assignments are never lethal, even when blowing up a flipping Apple store, and the news eats up the headlines. The stories really don't matter, but it's not every day a newspaper can say both a performance artist is and a public fountain is befouled all in one day. Within this escalation, Tyler robs a store, pointing a revolver to the back of a store clerk's head. The gun is later shown to be empty, but we don't know this as the audience, and Jack does not know this. Still, Tyler berates the store clerk. What did you want to study? What did you want to be? If you're not on your way to becoming a veterinarian in 6 weeks, you will be dead. Remember, all with a revolver to the back of his head. This is just in Tyler's worldview. The store clerk will aspire to become a veterinarian and will wake up the next morning with the most beautiful day of his life. His breakfast will taste better than any meal Jack or Tyler ever tasted. Despite bombing stores and pointing guns, it starts to make sense in a Tyler sort of way. In one scene, Jack goes from critical of Tyler's insanity to fully in support. Tyler's followers believe in Tyler, and why wouldn't they? The third and fourth rules of Project Mayhem are no excuses and no lies. Tyler Durden's army is ready! Tyler gathers Fight Club's most loyal members and officially indoctrinates them into Project Mayhem, serving as a further pledge of allegiance to Tyler's campaign, resulting in increasingly organized and dangerous homework assignments. Army recruitment consists of a 3-day test, where members stand rigidly outside Tyler's home while berated with insults, a test for becoming what Tyler wants us to be. Once passed, Tyler asks if you brought 2 black shirts, 2 pair of black pants, 1 pair of black boots, 2 pair of black socks, 1 black jacket, and 300 personal burial money. No longer is it the case of no shirt, no shoes. Now every recruit to Project Mayhem wears this uniform, bringing with them $300 in the case of death on the battlefield. Each Project Mayhem member must be ready to sacrifice himself for the greater good and his own dime. Almost surprisingly, Jack flatly admits Tyler built himself an army. But why does everyone follow Tyler? For what reason are they putting their lives and individuality on the line for Tyler? To what purpose? For what greater good? In Tyler, we trusted. This eerily echoes the United States official motto of "In God we trust." In Tyler we trusted. Tyler is parodying the institutions he despises and implying himself to be God. Jack is disillusioned while Tyler plays God. Jack and Tyler's visions and views deviate, yet Project Mayhem continues on, and by this point in the narrative, it is clear Jack and Tyler are the same person. Tyler wants to be legend, to not grow old. Jack feels left out of Project Mayhem, wanting a sense of belonging he no longer has. He is Jack's inflamed sense of rejection. Disillusioned, he wants to destroy Project Mayhem. He wants to destroy something beautiful. He is Jack's broken heart. Tyler hypocritically claims Project Mayhem does not belong to us. Members ask, is Mr. Durden building an army? Tyler has full control over every aspect of Project Mayhem, but mostly succeeds in making Project Mayhem seem like a decentralized collective working for a greater good. Bob's death reveals to Jack that alongside stripping Project Mayhem members of their sense of fashion, they are stripped of their names. Regardless of Project Mayhem members not having names, Tyler is still Tyler Durden, although sometimes people call him Mr. Durden. Not even Jack, who is Tyler, can stop Project Mayhem. Tyler is so powerful that even the most insane words are law. Members do not question Tyler when he asks if anyone interferes with Project Mayhem. Even Tyler they gotta get his balls. Members don't question orders to castrate Tyler if he stops his own project, and not only that, they view him as a brave man to order this. Tyler is willing to emasculate himself for trying to stop himself. Tyler wins. Fight Club is not a feel-good tale where Project Mayhem is stopped and Tyler goes to prison and everyone lives happily ever after, though it was in China for a few days. In the movie, Jack kills Tyler and holds Marla's hand as buildings explode in front of his eyes. Pixies' Where Is My Mind plays as buildings crumble and credits roll. Tyler's plan succeeds and his story is complete. Sure, Jack's ending is confusing and unclear at best, well illustrated by a song where the chorus repeats "Where is my mind" 3 times in a row, a song quite literally about being turned upside down. And further confusion abounds considering Tyler does succeed but dies pleading with Jack to think of everything we've accomplished and to think of how far you've come because of me. Blatantly flaunting his hypocrisy, Jack shoots himself through the cheek, therefore shooting Tyler through the brain where he can speak for a second before dying, while Jack literally stands up with a hoarse voice from likely a shot windpipe and orders his men to retreat but also get gauze to treat a crushed windpipe and blown out cheek. Either way, Fight Club is not something that belongs to a greater us, it's something that belongs exclusively to Tyler. For this, Tyler creates an army and pipeline of indoctrination. He feeds off the disillusioned and emasculated people who feel wronged by society to take action under Tyler as their god. Fight Club issues its warning. Be wary of Tyler and leaders like him. Very little of what I do is invention. Most of what I do is journalism. Tyler Durden's cool. This is objectively the wrong take on Fight Club. Tyler Durden's not cool. He's kind of an asshole. Like, an asshole is an understatement, but it's not hard to see why so many people think of Tyler Durden this way. Pete C. Baker, in a New Yorker op-ed, describes Fight Club as a tale of disaffected American men who chase authenticity by pummeling the shit out of each other in poorly lit basements. However, through this lens of coolness, Fight Club is also a guide on how to stop being a miserable beta and to be more like Tyler, an alpha who does what he wants and doesn't let anyone stand in his way. Language like beta and alpha are ideas coming from the Manosphere, a label for groups and communities prioritizing men in society, of which the most infamous are the Incel community, the seduction community, and men's rights activists. Incels, a term short for involuntary celibacy, is probably the most prominent of these groups, prioritizing men who cannot be sexually successful, and like Ing Soccer think poll from 1984, incels gain a new distinct meaning from the parts of involuntary celibacy. Incels are primarily seen as a community known for outputting mass shooters. Incels' worldview is a catastrophizing one, where you take the red pill and then the black pill. Catastrophization is the idea of taking small, logical steps to get to a completely illogical conclusion. An example of catastrophizing is if you're late to work, your boss is going to be mad at you, at which you will get fired, which will leave you homeless. Therefore, being late to work will leave you homeless. The red pilling of an incel, or later on members of the alt-right, is gradual. The idea of the red pill comes from the Matrix, while the black pill is a uniquely incel term. And much like Fight Club, The Matrix is a movie commonly used by ultra-masculine groups who look up to Neo, and like Fight Club is completely misunderstood, considering the creators of The Matrix are trans women. The red pill comes from a scene in which Morpheus refers to Neo, a slave, like everyone else, born into a prison for your mind, offering the red pill as the truth, nothing more. Incels are slaves in a sort of mental prison, and taking the red pill for them is adopting the incel worldview, where some men are born without the ability to attract partners, a view where females are femoids, and these femoids are hypergamous, meaning they seek men of higher status. These higher status men are known as chads or alphas who, with their appealing skull and wrist sizes, are able to attract women. Some incels can and do get laid. However, they are normies used by women as a stepping stone to getting themselves a chad. At its core, the red pill is the idea there are three groups of men: incels, normies, and chads. Where it becomes truly catastrophizing is when incels become black-pilled. The black pill is the subsequent idea that these three groups are genetically or hierarchically predetermined, that an incel is always going to remain a virgin and therefore will never be happy. It's unsurprising then that incel terminology consists of sui fuel and rope fuel, terms for encouraging suicide rather than self-help. Incel forums on places such as Reddit and 4chan only serve to isolate these groups as incels seek out a form of digital self-harm in them. With all this, it's no wonder why some people consider going ER, short for Elliot Rogers, who killed 6 and injured 14 in a shooting. Red pilling shields from all responsibility, all because by continuously taking these red pills, incels continuously change their perception of reality around them. A perfect example is seen in another Manosphere community, the pickup artist community, who objectify women and seek to obtain and dominate them sexually for no real purpose other than because they can. In order to do this, they have to create the idea that women want this. Matt Forney, a popular pickup artist, states that deep inside, every girl is screaming for a man to put her in her place. The seduction community, as it's also known, view women as a scientifically hackable quest for maximum sex with minimal emotional investment. It's stupid, I know, it sounds silly. And Baker describes the rise of Fight Club as a possible danger that came with the rise of the pickup artist community, specifically the book, The Game, Penetrating the Secret Society of Pickup Artists by Neil Strauss. This liminal book of pickup artistry opens by assuaging doubts that the events of this book are real. It really happened. Strauss then asks us to not hate the player, hate the game. In other words, don't hate the pickup artist or the misogynist, the ones who've said these stupid quotes I just had to repeat, but hate the society that made women hard to get. There have been many books that have come after this one, many people hoping to capitalize off the seduction community by promising that these are perfect techniques, when in reality they just don't work. These techniques mostly don't work because they have gems of advice like not complimenting women will help you because you are withholding a reward that all women want, one they will stick around waiting for. Bullshit. But if something's wrong, if these amazing techniques don't work, then it is because the world does not bend to a natural order. And in cases of discord, perceptions and reality itself can be shifted to comply with the natural order. And this natural order is polarizing. A natural order that, according to Roosh V, another prominent pickup artist, is women and gays are seen as superior to straight men. This quote is just another perfect example of the levels of reality that get distorted from red pilling. And once bathed in this natural order, it's hard to escape. You no longer think of yourself as capable of being wrong, fostering an us versus them mentality and infinite scapegoats for blame. It fosters the ability to have a populace that can be instilled to act on any order. You can escape. Neil Strauss, the author of The Game, did, but he is just one in a community of many. Manosphere communities feel systematically emasculated, Incels will blame chads and alphas, pickup artists will blame women, and men's rights activists blame Western civilization. In the men's rights movement, feminists, the gays, cultural Marxists are to blame. Feminism within men's rights activist groups are seen almost as a boogeyman. Research done on r/men's rights shows that the two biggest themes in the community are an active oppression of men and a pervasiveness of feminism. To the MRA community, feminism is everywhere in the government and academic communities, in your fucking video games. And feminism is out to get you. This is how you get Gamergate. The idea that the government is funding hundreds of millions of dollars in order to invade the video game industry with feminism and cultural Marxism, whatever the fuck that means. All of this in response to research aimed towards making games, STEM, and society better and more inclusive, something I explore in my video, Why Women Don't Code But Trans Women Do. This Manosphere sense of the word feminism and cultural Marxism is pretty much devoid of any meaning. They're just a catch-all word for them, because when the Manosphere talks of feminism in Gamergate, they're talking about the opposite of everything I just said, a worsening of games, STEM, and society. All of this unironically reminds me of Big Brother. That is not to say that feminism is by any means Big Brother, but I am saying that's what these groups believe. And this cultural Marxism and feminism is bad. They ask others to use their preferred pronouns, words at the vanguard of ideology frighteningly similar to the Marxist doctrines that killed at least 100 million people in the 20th century. This quote from Jordan Peterson's op-ed on the National Post is what propelled him into fame by capitalizing off prejudice around Bill C-16 in Canada. Peterson believes that pronouns are quite literally 1984, which, as I've stated previously, is antithetical to what literally 1984 says, as pronouns give people more expression rather than less. Let's take this one step further. Putin, in his blood and soil campaign to occupy Ukraine, put out a statement on March 16th, 2022, stating that gender freedoms are at the part of decadence and national betrayal to Russia. Putin even used the same exact tools Donald Trump used on the campaign trail for the purpose of attacking the Donetsk region by creating extremism and Russian sympathy. Keep in mind, this information has existed since 2019. This is where Manosphere ideology becomes incredibly dangerous beyond merely a personal prejudice. Their systematic emasculation by an entire system and culture leads towards a vulnerability that is exploited by right-wing populist leaders. This is where Fight Club becomes Project Mayhem. This is where a populist leader can create Jonestown. This is where a reality TV host can become Donald Trump. And these Manosphere communities are insulated because of the design and culture of 4chan and Reddit's communities. Manosphere communities are continuously self-radicalized. They gatekeep and implicitly or explicitly discourage female participation, and this creates a feedback loop. If you've ever been in an event where the microphone sounds really loud out of the speakers and you get like a whoop noise, that's a feedback loop. What happens is the microphone is picking up the speaker's sound, and then the speakers play the sound from the microphone, so it gets louder and louder and louder until someone turns off the microphone. That is a feedback loop. And this feedback loop is propelled by memes and in-jokes that only the groups understand. As Innuendo Studios puts it, how do you explain to a journalist that the colors purple and green are a symbol of rape in the Gamergate logo? How do you explain that the number 1488 is a Nazi number? And the worst part about this is those attempting to de-radicalize join a losing battle because those radicalized are already in their in-group, and we have to convince them to go against that in-group. Fight Club echoes Manosphere ideology Baker talks of his experience in the online incel community, where he saw references and offhand worship of Brad Pitt's character Tyler Durden all the time. Because in the incel worldview, Tyler Durden's a Chad, Marla's a hypergamous femoid, and Jack's a Normie. This op-ed, though, was actually not in response to Fight Club, but in response to Joker. Joker presents us with Arthur Fleck, a mentally ill social outcast, a white man, perhaps inevitably so neglected and maltreated by the world that his recourse to violence is all but guaranteed. Yet Baker continues that if jumping from one movie to another were possible, Joker would be a great candidate for Project Mayhem. Joker embodies the idea of an incel going ER. Joker starts off with a mentally ill clown, Arthur Fleck, who slowly falls down a rabbit hole of being ignored by society. Joker is slowly red-pilled through this refusal of help, through rejection by women, by the world hating him, to the point where he has a Joker moment. In our online lingo, what does having a Joker moment even mean? Does it mean when Joker killed 2 people on the subway? Does it mean when Joker kills Murray on live TV? Does it mean when the riots ensue afterwards? Does it really matter? A Joker moment is synonymous for this idea of going ER, for the idea of taking online actions and shitposting on 4chan and taking real world and decisive action. And the Batman franchise is ripe for picking apart by incels. As FD Signifier puts it, is Joker really the incel or is Batman? Violence is the only answer for these Manosphere communities. Incels are seen by some as almost terroristic in their mindset. When an incel becomes black-pilled or even red-pilled, it's almost no wonder that the next step is to go ER. The world is absolutely broken in their mind, and further, biologically or hierarchically determined, in their mind, they would be doing the world a service. We can in some ways sympathize with Joker, and even cheer him on as he goes ER. This isn't to say that every incel would commit a hate crime or act of terrorism, but that these groups are so hopeless and exploitable that they very easily could, given the right prodding from the right people. Incels largely overlap with the US alt-right, and much like incels, there are a staggering amount of parallels between movements in the alt-right and the concepts in Fight Club. Southern Poverty Law Center classifies incels under their ideology of male supremacy. A tight overlap exists between the alt-right white supremacist and male supremacist circles, which feed each other's narratives of the dispossession and oppression of white men, which is blamed on minorities, immigrants, and women. Both the alt-right and the Manosphere agree that feminism is the cause of Western civilizational decline. In fact, the misogyny intrinsic to the alt-right might very well be one of its distinctive features, or a gateway drug. And this gateway drug is the red pill, a pill that comes in all shapes and sizes, ranging Islamophobia, homophobia, anti-SJW sentiment, anti-Semitism, you name it. According to research from the Swiss Institute of Technology, there is significant overlap in the user bases of the Manosphere and the alt-right, and users in the Manosphere systematically go on to consume alt-right content. A red-pilled incel is extremely vulnerable to indoctrination to the alt-right or further spiraling into the black pill, all going to show how exploitable the emasculation and disillusionment mentality is in reality. It's been about 2 months since I last recorded a segment for this video, but I really wanted to give this section an in-person appearance, because this is where we get into the really insidious shit and the implications of Fight Club and what I really want to talk about in this video. Think of everything that we've talked about before, and now this is where we are going to be connecting it to Trump. That is why I am here instead of just a little MAGA hat personification of myself. Fight Club overlaps with Donald Trump's presidential campaign. This story extends beyond Donald Trump's presidential campaign And this is where I have to bring in a name I mentioned at the start of this video, Christopher Wylie, because Fight Club is a story that, when analyzed, leads you down a lot of very, very interesting places. This is not the story of Trump, actually. It's the story of how Steve Bannon is Tyler Durden. Background is going to be necessary for this. Christopher Wylie is one of the founding members of a firm called Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica popped in the news with a series of articles from The Guardian serving as an expose into the organization. The Guardian's headlines ranged from "I made Steve Bannon's psychological warfare tool" to 50 million Facebook profiles harvested, to headlines featuring Brexit, Facebook police raids, you name it. If you know about the Facebook leaks, this is where this comes from. By 2014, Cambridge Analytica was a psychological warfare firm used by alt-right leaders, Trump, Ted Cruz, Roy Blunt, Tom Cotton, with interest from people like Jeb Bush. With millions invested by right-wing investors, and with heavy influence from Steve Bannon, Cambridge Analytica was a direct part of the alt-right's creation story in America through its targeting of Incel and Incel-adjacent communities to create ripples that would almost inevitably lead to the election of Donald Trump. This was done through the harvesting of 87 million Facebook profiles, in which Cambridge Analytica created psychological profiles, which would be used to create and target campaign advertisements. This is far more dangerous than you would first think. In 2019, Wylie published a memoir talking about his time at Cambridge Analytica, the story of how he created the alt-right. Mindfuck is one of the best books I have read. It's a mixture of terrifying and interesting that I wouldn't recommend enough. I have a personal connection to this. Christopher Wylie is a gay data scientist, a fashion, psychology, and sociology nerd, and I relate to him a lot. He thought of the world almost like a game. He wanted to be at the edge of science, and he was, with the work he was doing. He wanted to be remembered for decades. I can understand the excitement. I get excited about projects sometimes, overlooking important details, like my own mental health on a 2-hour video about Fight Club. And although, I didn't create something like the alt-right, glossing over key details in my excitement for projects has led to criticism from others. And eventually, the extent of what Wylie did crashed down on him, and he blew the whistle. As a gay and disabled man, he created something opposed to his existence, and also one that is opposed to mine. And because of that, I can put myself in his shoes. Wylie learned how to create an uprising because he helped create one. And the concept is actually quite simple.
Insurgencies by nature are asymmetric, in that a few people can cause large effects. You identify the types of people who are both susceptible to new thinking and connected enough to inject a counter-narrative into their social network. The manipulator attempts to steal the concept of a self from his target. Often this involves gradually breaking down what are called psychological resilience factors over several months. Targets are encouraged to begin catastrophizing about minor or even imagined events. Counter-narratives also attempt to foster distrust in order to mitigate communication with others. The ultimate aim is to trigger negative emotions and thought processes associated with impulsive, erratic, or compulsive behavior.
I feel like I just summarized the plot of Fight Club. Tyler Durden identifies Jack as susceptible to new ideas. He creates a community of people like Jack in Fight Club. He gradually breaks Jack down. Jack starts to view the world differently and stops trusting anyone outside of Fight Club. Durden can then make Jack, or the other Fight Club members, act on their negative emotions in order to carry out his bidding. Cambridge Analytica found 3 major traits that led someone to be the most susceptible to this manipulation. Wylie called these dark triad traits. They are Machiavellianism, or ruthless self-interest after Machiavelli, a fucking ancient philosopher or something, I don't know, psychopathy, and narcissism. Some of these can be seen in Jack. Some of these can be seen in Jack. As I said, he is kind of a narcissist. Steve Bannon, though, through the use of Cambridge Analytica capitalized off of the jacks of the world. And Steve Bannon views himself as a thinker. Steve Bannon is actually more important than Trump in this story. Trump being more so the result, with Bannon being the journey. Wylie describes his first interactions with Steve Bannon in quite positive terms. We talked for 4 hours, not only about politics, but about fashion and culture, Foucault, the third-wave feminist Judith Butler, and the nature of the fractured self. He spoke with a certain wokeness I hadn't expected at all. Before this, Wylie had never known about Steve Bannon. Why would he? Bannon was just a small contributor to Breitbart News, and, by the way Wylie describes it, kind of a fucking grifter, isn't he? He saw something unique, though. He saw how incels could be mobilized, specifically during the events of Gamergate. He learned this group was fierce, having run a gold farming service in World of Warcraft. He saw that a toxic web can mold a toxic self, which led him to Cambridge Analytica. Gamergate made Breitbart and made Steve Bannon. Later, though, Wylie recognized some of Bannon's hypocrisies in viewing himself as this sort of free thinker.
I knew Bannon would go on rants about how America was changing too much, his prophetic notion of an impending great conflict, or his misreading of Dharma in Hinduism, which bordered on fetishistic Orientalism.
But what did Bannon want? What did Bannon want with a military and counterterrorism contractor? Bannon was against the establishment. Bannon describes Wylie describes Bannon as wanting to break everything, fracture the establishment. He did not want the state dictating America's destiny. He was a libertarian. And to do this, he needed an army for his movement. He needed an army to unleash chaos. So for such grand philosophical ideals, libertarianism, where could Bannon start his army? All he needed was a basis. And from that basis, he could build. And that basis would be the incel community. Wylie describes incels as
men who felt ignored and chastised by society, particularly women, that did not value average men anymore. The incel community was in part propelled by the increasing economic inequality. Depriving young millennial men from accessing the same kind of well-paying jobs their father has had.
Incels are nothing more than men bitter with our corporate world. They feel emasculated, fucked in the ass by society, and they need someone to follow. Therefore, it would make sense that as Project Mayhem members follow Tyler Durden, incels are perversely attracted to society's winners, like Donald Trump, who in their warped view represent the epitome of the same hyper-competitive alphas who brutalize them. These are people who started by watching Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro. They're attracted to the spectacle of Trump as he presents a view of insurgency to upend the status quo. Even further, many of these seething young men were ready to burn society to the ground. Incels would become a perfect base for an insurgency. All Bannon needed was a foundation. Wylie speaks to this.
Cambridge Analytica needed only to infect a small sliver of the population. Then it could watch it spread. Meetings took place in counties all across the United States, starting with the early Republican primary states, and people would get more and more fired up about what they saw as us versus them. What began as their digital fantasy, sitting alone in their bedrooms, late at night, clicking on links, was becoming their new reality. The narrative was right in front of them, talking to them, live and in the flesh.
Cambridge Analytica didn't need to convince everyone. They just needed a small number of people, primarily Manosphere communities or the people associated with them, to start organizing in small groups. Then they'd organize in bigger groups. Then they would self-organize and self-campaign. Once that was done, Cambridge Analytica could move on to the next place and watch as the virus spread. Cambridge Analytica went beyond just exploring incels in the Manosphere, but also looking into and capitalizing off of racial intentions. They would explore what people truly believed. White men in America felt closeted. Where they once could be racist or misogynistic, now because of political correctness culture, wokeness, they would be labeled as racist. They felt closeted the same way the fucking gays do. But by no means are they marginalized. And this sense of being in the closet, even something as simple as having closeted hobbies, that of general Reddit culture actually, is a powerful tool for radicalization into the alt-right. And research shows their methods are effective. Two of their tactics were tailoring and micro-targeting. Tailoring is creating advertisements for a specific populace, and micro-targeting is taking advertisements and showing them to people on an individual level, taking the right ads and showing them to the right people. And with 87 million Facebook profiles, Cambridge Analytica was able to create psychological profiles of millions upon millions of Americans. They would then tailor advertisements that would polarize populations. Once these tailor ads like, I don't know, drain the swamp, make America great again, were created, Cambridge Analytica targeted these advertisements to people on an individual level to create the most polarization. The advertisements Cambridge Analytica used show patterns that actually mirror r/men's rights. Engagement is the highest when the target is either angered or disgusted. This campaign messaging appealed to a sense of being in the closet in regards to racism and misogyny and transphobia, and targeted people on an individual level to cause the most damage. Cambridge Analytica colonized the self, hearts, and minds of people on an individual level. Recent research from the 2020 election shows that even with fairly tame Trump advertisements, showcasing Biden mocking people, Hunter Biden's corruption, Biden taking away guns, Biden saying black Trump supporters are not black, and the neglection of veterans, etc., that simply just targeting these ads to the right people for the greatest polarization could decrease an unaligned group's intent to vote in Biden by 7.1%. That is enough to sway close elections, with Jacobs Harakawa predicting that this algorithm could have flipped Arizona from Biden to Trump. And what's the funniest thing about Jacobs Harakawa's research is that it uses scikit-learn, a data science library meant for beginners, just to showcase that implementing this methodology is easy. For fuck's sake, I could have done this given enough spare time. I, a fucking 18-year-old, but now 19 as of saying this, high school graduate, freshman college student, whatever, have enough knowledge that I could have helped swing fucking Arizona from Biden to Trump. That is fucked up. Cambridge Analytica's work, though, went beyond simple data science and campaign ads. They had 87 million Facebook profiles. They did not just swing a state, they swayed an entire country's culture. With all this, it's no wonder that I call Bannon or Trump the same as Durden. They're both quasi-religious leaders leading an extremist movement of hypocrisy. The only difference is that Durden's happens in 2 hours on screen and Bannon over years in the real world. The ball started rolling with Bannon and it keeps rolling faster as Roe v. Wade is overturned and trans and queer people are targeted and villainized. The actions of alt-right leaders like Tucker Carlson are responsible for the events of like mass shootings of a black community in Buffalo, New York. Remember that? That happened. We kind of forgot about that. And it is shown time and time again for years that the use of online polarization can directly lead to offline extremism, whether through academic research or through the thousands of pages of online manifestos written by mass shootings, or through the literal creation story of the alt-right. It's a pipeline that leads to countless acts of stochastic and unpredictable extremist violence. Cambridge Analytica hacked society. Durden hacked society. In hacking, there is a term called a 0 day. 0 days are vulnerabilities, exploits, and bugs in code that have not been seen or patched. These 0 days can be sold for sometimes a few hundred or a few $1,000,000. An example is when the US and Israel, using 4 0 days, likely costing in the millions of dollars to acquire, was able to shut down Iran's nuclear program. Cambridge Analytica in the 2010s and the author of Fight Club in 1996 found exploits in society. They exploit frustration, racial and ethnic tensions, misogyny, and systematic oppression. And once that exploit, that 0 day, was found in society, it was used not to de-radicalize or reduce tensions, because it very well could have, but to further cause tensions because a handful of wealthy men viewed it all as a game. They created a populist campaign that upturned the status quo for the worse, and now we have to struggle to once again upturn the status quo for the better. Populism is not inherently bad. Fight Club is both a story about reclaiming masculinity, but it's also about destroying corrupt systems. Fight Club's duality is its potential to be reactionary or progressive. Fight Club demonstrates how a system can be destroyed. This can pose a threat to some systems. A perfect example is recently China changed the unchanged the ending of Fight Club on Tencent TV. Sometimes the system being threatened is women having rights. Some other times it's the rich profiting off the backs of the poor and the downtrodden. Fight Club is a story of populism. And like most political strategies, the power of the people is in the hands of the wielder. Leftists run on populist campaigns, and so do the right, promising everyone an equal vote, good pay, housing, healthcare, education. These things all appeal to people's needs and upend the status quo. Just because the right is enamored with Fight Club as their origin story doesn't mean we shouldn't learn a few things from it. Hell, Fight Club is my favorite movie. Because populism is effective. Everyone has needs, and we need to really hammer in on those needs. In the fall of 2011, a few hundred protesters gathered outside America's most important financial institutions on Wall Street in New York City. Their goal was to occupy the veins of the 1%, routing blood to the other 99%. The movement spread across the country and overseas to hundreds of cities, mostly through the help of the internet. A movement grew off the backs of populism, one much like Fight Club. Destroy the financial institutions and spread the wealth among us. Police resistance and lack of specific planning led to the movement's eventual failure, but the movement was able to galvanize a progressive base for politicians like Bernie Sanders. Occupy Wall Street set the stage for tactics and rhetoric of the left for at least a decade. Occupy Wall Street is like Fight Club. The Occupy movement realized that the economic structures of the 1% were a fundamental force holding the populace down. These systems couldn't just be amended, but had to be entirely done away with. Revolution was the name of the game in both cases. They didn't help people pay off their debts or invest in stocks. They wanted to end our banking systems and the stock market. Fight Club did this through blowing up credit buildings, and while I'm not saying we should do that, at a certain point, a sort of violent populism that the right espouses becomes tempting to the left, especially when our futures are uncertain. In the case of climate change, we have to start asking ourselves, when is enough?
Tyler is Jack's desire for change. Jack creates Tyler because he's looking for a way to change his life. Tyler is the perfect alpha male. Tyler looks like Jack wants to, fucks like Jack wants to, and most importantly, free in all the ways Jack is not. Tyler doesn't need to worry about his skull shape and treats women as sport. Tyler doesn't need to worry about his IKEA catalog or maintaining a perfect condo lifestyle. Tyler is quite literally all the way a man wishes they could be. So it's no wonder why he's worshipped in Manosphere circles. He's their perfect leader. He overcomes his life as a beta and becomes a legend, a god.
being an incel or a toxically masculine, manly man isn't healthy. It just isn't. Tyler claims all people see themselves as they'd like to be in reference to this, which is, it's in some ways true. Everyone wishes they had something they don't. And these groups feel wronged by society, the same kind of wronging a leftist author writing about Trump's exploitation of incels feels about the status quo. But an incel's desperation leads them down a dark path, a path that can be easily exploited for ill means. Their ideas of correcting society are an imposition of their ideologies onto everyone else, something that cannot be done alone. So when a leader like Trump comes along, recognizing these groups as the perfect army, Manosphere circles willingly latch on until the end. Populist leaders are dangerous. They're dangerous because they exploit a vulnerable group and utilize them for personal gain. People who are radicalized by being in groups like Fight Club, like Project Mayhem, like Incel, pickup artists, and MRA forums like the fucking Trump campaign or Charlottesville protests. Fincher and Palahniuk do their jobs too well, making it tempting to fall for the cult of Tyler. The internet, and even the way Reddit or YouTube are designed, makes it even easier for campaigns to capitalize off the already weak people who can be de-radicalized by a cup of tea, counseling, healthcare, education, through desegregated environments, a round of soccer, Christmas, and Mother's Day cards. By being more clear with our language rather than hiding behind fancy academic terms. And this is all because we're reaching out to groups who don't want to be de-radicalized. If they can be de-radicalized, it's not something they'd tell us how to do. And why would they believe us? To them, we're all a bunch of NPCs. Manosphere circles remain in these polarized groups with leaders who polarize them further as they chant to not hate the player, hate the game. But it's not, and we should hate the game, but not the game these groups believe in and are conditioned to believe in. We should hate and seek to uproot the systems which not only create populist leaders, but also create groups with these exploitable and dangerous mentalities. Thank you for watching. I'd like to thank my one Patreon, Antoine, for supporting this channel, everyone on my Discord who follows my Twitter, and if you liked this crazy fucking long video, please do subscribe. Hit the like button, shoot me a comment if you haven't already. That's about it. I will see you all in the next video that's hopefully not a 2 fucking hour video. Bye bye.